Hello, and welcome to the Child Care Business Coach. My name is Evelyn Knight. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me. So today I want to talk about a difficult subject, but one that is very necessary. So I've talked very little bit about it on this podcast. My husband has end-stage kidney disease, and last week he suffered from a stroke that put him in the hospital and was pretty shocking and devastating for me. So you might be wondering what that has to do with childcare and being a leader in early childhood education. And what it is that being ready for disasters that will hit your business is very, very important. So with what's going on with my husband, it was very difficult because he was in the hospital, and last month was a very rough month for him altogether. We've been in and out of the emergency room, doctor's visits. I frankly am shocked it took them so long to admit him to the hospital. I knew something was very wrong. So when dealing with a situation like this, I've missed a lot of work, and I really don't have a lot of time to be at my center. I'm literally at my center right now, maybe 5 to 10 hours a week at most. But my center needs to be able to thrive and move on without me. That is very important. So I do have the systems in place now to make sure that that is something my center can handle. But that hasn't always been the case. In 2012, disaster had hit my family, and my husband had a really bad case of pneumonia, which the hospital missed the first time. So he spent almost a month in the hospital. And during that period, things had gotten so rough for my family that I actually had 2 different doctors ask me if my affairs were in order. So it was a devastating time. Around the same time, I was starting to get really sick, and we didn't know what was going on with me. It turned out that I had a neurological disease, which I've also talked about a little bit, that at the time was undiagnosed. Well, going through all this, and there was a lot more, but I'm just going to summarize between those 2 things. It was very, very difficult for me mentally. So I kind of checked out, to be honest. I really just wasn't there. Life had gotten extremely overwhelming between what my husband was dealing with and then what I was dealing with. It took almost a year for me to get a diagnosis and for the doctors to stabilize me. And during that time, I really wasn't involved in my business. I literally checked out. I wasn't there, and things weren't getting done. I did have some systems in place that I thought were being covered. I had an accountant at the time that I thought was taking care of things. But really the only person who's really responsible when push comes to shove is the owner of a center. The director does carry some responsibility when it comes to things like the general like licensing and classroom management, enrollment. But when it comes to like payroll and taxes and your overall finances, the owner is responsible no matter what kind of what you've got in place. So I learned the hard way that I have to figure out a way to be on top of things even when I'm not there. And there's got to be systems in place. So you guys will hear me talk all the time. You'll hear me saying things like, you have to have a written procedure for everything. And I do. I've got procedures for every little thing. And I've said this over and over again, how important that is. Well, this is where that came about. During that time, I didn't have my procedures in place. I didn't have everything in writing. And it led to absolute disaster that took years for me to dig my way out of. And hiring extra help. I mean, it literally cost me well over $150,000 to fix the disastrous type of problems that occurred during that period that I was away, I was checked out, and that I didn't have checks and balances put into place. So here I am again, facing a similar situation, but this time I'm prepared. And I cannot even begin to tell you how much better things feel this time. What I'm going through in my personal life absolutely sucks, and it isn't fun at all to deal with. But the fact that I don't have to worry about my business right now, and that isn't a huge weight on my shoulders also, and I don't have to wonder how I'm going to get things done, how am I going to get there to, just for everything, is such a huge relief. So that's just something I think is very important for every one of you out there to really, really think about. Life is inevitable. These life events that hit us inevitably happen to every single one of us. So it's really important to be prepared. We tend to think that we are superhuman sometimes. We all do this. We become workaholics. We think we have to do it ourselves. Most of us who are in leadership positions are A-type personalities. So it's very difficult for us to delegate and to give up control. But we really need to step back and ask ourselves, at what cost? And at what point is not being prepared going to cost you a lot? I cannot tell you guys how much it has cost my family. And it's not just the money, the stress of it. My children walking in, finding me crying in my closet on the floor because I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to dig my family out of the mess I created. Those are the kind of things that you can prepare for. And I really hope I can help just giving even just some light suggestions. I also do coaching. So if this is something you would like to get into a little bit more, I'd be happy to help you with. It's one of my passions now, is just to help people just get out of the messes that they're in, or to just avoid them, since I had to go through it. And my business consultant and coach really helped me to find my way out. It was such a dark time in my life. It was probably the darkest period in my life, just because not only was my family dealing with illness, but we also had to deal with financial disaster. And my business was just in an absolute disarray. So I just came up with a few suggestions to help you prepare. But I really, really recommend talking to a professional, talking to a lawyer, talking to an accountant, your insurance agent, all of those professionals, to make sure you have plans and systems in place in case of life events that come your way. They happen to us all, you guys. And I'll tell you, with the neurological disease that I have, there were times that I would go into states that were classified as a coma. They didn't last very long. Sometimes they only lasted about 24 hours. But when push comes to shove, institutions like the IRS do not care. You can be in a coma and those taxes still better be paid. They don't care. There is no medical documentation that will save you from the IRS or your state income taxes, anything like that. I've talked to other business owners. I met one who had cancer, and it was an absolute aggressive form. He was going through chemotherapy, and it was a really bad situation in his life. And the IRS, they didn't care. And this poor guy lost everything. He ended up building back again but he had to start over from scratch, which is an awesome story too, that he didn't let it bring him down and he didn't give up. So if there's one thing I can also encourage you guys, if you're going through something like this, if you're at the other end and you're facing these gigantic mountains in front of you of debt, or your staff is in a disarray and you're coming back and your business is just, or if you're in the middle of it maybe, and you just know what's happening to your business is an absolute disaster, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. It can get better. It doesn't stay that way. I know how horrible that feels. I know that feeling of just being so overwhelmed and not knowing if you're going to make it. And even if you don't, even if you get to the point that you do have to shut your doors, don't let that destroy you. Failure isn't always a bad thing, you guys. And in order to really, really succeed in life, you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to take those risks. You really don't fail until the moment that you give up. Once you give up, you've reached true failure. As long as you don't give up, you do not fail. So just remember that no matter how bad things get, just don't give up on yourself. And even if it's the specific center you're working with right now that doesn't end up succeeding, it doesn't mean that you have failed. You can try again. So let me get into the tips that I have put together for you. And again, I am not a lawyer, an insurance agent, or an accountant, and I highly advise you to talk to them. But so these are just some of the techniques I've used internally. Learn to delegate. You cannot be the only person who knows how to do everything, or who knows even just how to do one of the things. Other people in your center have to know what is going on. I was at one point, I was the only one who knew how to submit fingerprints to the state to get certain employees background checked. I was also the only one who knew how to turn in the results for the different, your annual license. I was the only one who knew how to do all of that. So you can only guess what happens when I'm checked out. It doesn't get done. And then the fines start coming in, right? So you cannot be the only person who knows how to do this. Make a list of all the tasks you complete within a day, within a month, and within a year. And then categorize those tasks. Actually separate them out into the categories, different categories that you use as an overview. Then take each one of those categories and train a specific person on stepping in case of an emergency. It can be your assistant director. It can be a lead teacher. It can be your brother, your sister, your cousin. It can be anybody, but make sure somebody knows to step in and take over for you during an emergency on each different category. Here are some of the categories I use, and I just jotted some quickly down. So just kind of think it through. I'm sure I've missed something here, but I have parent relations, which is something you can easily delegate to a teacher. Curriculum planning, again, a lead teacher. And I don't expect the teachers, like each teacher can do their own curriculum planning, but somebody needs to oversee it to make sure it is getting completed and implemented. Problem behaviors, just making sure that people are staying on top of them. In my center, we have a theory. Well, it's not really a theory. I mean, it's pretty much proven that when you are maintaining a proper classroom that is developmentally appropriate with well-trained teachers and it's supplied properly, you really minimize how many behavior problems happen because your staff knows how to prevent them from starting. So it's important to make sure that the problem behaviors aren't happening a lot, because if they are, it means you have a problem. You have some kind of classroom problem. If you have one child, it's pretty typical. You're always going to have that tough kid. That's just inevitable. But when you are seeing patterns, 90% of the time, I should say 99% of the time, because when you've got a pattern, it's the adults involved that are causing the behavior problems. So that's something somebody is in charge of keeping an eye on, which we just kind of monitor incident reports for that. Supplying the center, making sure that do we have, just the basic stuff. There was a point when I checked out where I was the only one buying toilet paper and paper towels for our center. So imagine what happens if I'm not there to buy toilet paper. My staff is basically scrambling, trying to figure it out. So just that might seem so minuscule, but if for some reason you're not there and you have to just kind of disappear for a week or two, somebody needs to make sure that stuff is getting done. Supplying the center payroll, making sure payroll gets out. That's a big one, right? That was one that thank God I never did avoid, but I've always made sure my staff got their paychecks. That was just a huge priority for me. But going along with payroll, one that's easy to miss and get in trouble with, and I see countless owners get in trouble with this. I cannot tell you how many owners get in trouble in this area. It's payroll taxes. This is an area that I got hit pretty hard. I thought that my accountant was dealing with it. And it's a very long story. I just assumed it was getting done and it wasn't. And so that was a very difficult hole to dig out of. So payroll tax is huge. Make sure that you are not the only person, that you do have a check and balance system on payroll taxes. Probably one of the most important things you can do. Maintenance, making sure that your center is being maintained. Not only is that important for licensing, but it's also just important for aesthetics and making sure you keep them in enrollment. If your center starts looking pretty bad, it's going to be harder to get enrollment. The way your center looks, how it's maintained is going to be huge in first impressions, especially if you have competition that looks great. So making sure someone is helping out with or like the overall overseeing of maintenance. That's what it really is. Bookkeeping, including paying the bills, making sure that power bill gets paid, making sure your water bill, your phone bill. When you are dealing with a disaster, it is very easy to miss those bills. Auto pay is wonderful for that. Making sure that everything is just on auto pay can work really well, but you should also have somebody overseeing that, and not just, but like a backup plan. It doesn't have to necessarily be overseeing it. Banking and this, like making sure checks get to the bank, deposits are being made. It sounds so simple, but you just never know if you're the one doing it all the time. Is it going to get done? If you, God forbid, but if you get into a car accident and you're in the hospital, who's going to be depositing those checks? So somebody who can be overseeing that, making sure that gets done, and just kind of seeing the bank accounts. With a good system, you're going to have more than one bank account if you've got a really good financial system. So making sure all the bank accounts are being coordinated and just overseeing it. And I've talked to you guys about how I do believe in being transparent. So I am transparent to the point that my assistant director does have the bank account logins. And she doesn't have any access to transferring or doing anything like that, but she can just log in and look to make sure. It's a very basic overview that she has. It's mainly just like a QuickBooks overview where she can make sure that we're not running low in any of our bank accounts, and that everything is being allocated correctly to each one of the bank accounts as the money comes in. So she can also double check to make sure there's no chargebacks through our credit card processing, different things like that in case I need to step away. And then also making sure somebody is in charge of your annual calendar. A lot of times these are the kind of things that we have in our head, right? But we don't always put in writing, so things don't get done. Like, you're going to have a Christmas play every year, and you probably know that your staff needs to have a plan for their play and they have to be rehearsing by a certain date. But do you have that in writing anywhere? And do you have anybody in charge of it in case you're not able to do it? So make sure that that is delegated to somebody too. And that's another easy one that you can give to a teacher, because it's really just making sure things get posted and completed. So the other thing I would really suggest on that end is to have a check and balance system even for those areas. Have a family member or somebody close to you overseeing all of that. Just kind of create a checklist of things that they can check on and oversee for you. Even a business advisor or a business coach can help out with that. Just making, making a phone call to check to make sure everything is getting done. You can give them a list of questions to ask so that they know what to look for and what you want done. And make sure they have ways of knowing for sure that these things are really getting done, some kind of evidence for it. Because instinctually, whoever they're calling is just going to say, oh yeah, that's getting done, even if it's not. So you just want to have like a way that they can check to make sure it is being completed. So you're really looking for a check and balance system on your check and balance system. So make sure your finances are organized and well documented. This is important for the success of business, even during normal operations without any kind of stressful life events. But it's even more important when things are stressful. The more things that you have organized and in order, the easier it will be for somebody else to step in. And it'll also be quicker and easier for you to get the things done that you just have to get done. So instead of spending 40 to 50 hours a week at my center, I can still get everything I need done in 5 to 10 hours a week. And right now, I haven't actually been at my center at all for about a week and a half, and I don't expect to be there this week. I'm actually recording this right now at 10 p.m., and so that's easy enough for me to get on my podcast, complete this task. But I can't just go to my center at 10 p.m. and deal with staff and things like that. The hours of operations there make it much more difficult for me to maintain something. Whereas like this podcast, I can do from my home at 10 o'clock at night. So think about that, the things that you can do from home versus the things that you can do at the center. Also, have a list of things like that. Have a list of your passwords to get on different websites that you may not be able to, or that you normally don't access from home, so that you can. Having a cloud drive is helpful to store those passwords so you can access different things from home that you normally might have saved at the center. Just having that access can be very helpful. Last week, while my husband was in the hospital, it was nice. A lot of times you just sit there and for hours and hours on end, you're just sitting there with no information, with nothing. And so it was very helpful for me to be able to log on and get some work done. It really helped me get my mind off of things, like just not focus so heavily on what was going on. It helped me to kill time. I don't know, work can be therapeutical for me. So it was a huge help and a relief that I was able to do some stuff online and still fulfill some of my duties without actually having to be at the center. So make sure that you have access to that kind of stuff also. And just being well organized and documenting everything helps with that very, very much. I can't even tell you guys how much easier it'll make your life. Make sure you have an accountant that you have a very good relationship with. Having an accountant that you communicate well with, that you have a good relationship with, and one that you're not just communicating with during the emergencies or just during your tax time really isn't healthy for your business. If you need that accountant or a good bookkeeper to step in while you're gone, they should be somebody that you trust and someone who knows exactly how you want things done and how you prefer things handled. So having a plan in place in writing also and getting together with that accountant ahead of time is really helpful in that situation. Also, again, I can't stress the importance of talking to a lawyer to get a plan in place. Have a will, have a trust. Just have directions, just even having it organized in a way to make sure it's all legally prepared for you in case you do end up in a situation where somebody else is really calling the shots. Having a power of attorney for somebody, all of that can be extremely important in case somebody else needs to get to your bank account or to make sure your payroll's done, things like that. So talk to a lawyer for sure to make sure that you have the proper checks and balances in place when it comes to the legal end of things. Also, talk to your insurance agent. Make sure that you are properly covered for all different types of situation, not just your business liability, but health-wise, any kind of personal liability that may arise because of what's going on. Just have them go over and know your insurance policy. Make sure you're not underinsured. So important. Just really know the value of what you have so that if something were to happen, you are prepared. Well, I hope these quick tips are helpful. I know there is a lot more that you can do. And again, planning and organizing. And as you're going through your daily life, just start documenting how you do things, how you want them done. Turn what you do every day into steps. Literally create the steps to how you handle each situation. And have that ready in case someone does have to step in for you. Again, I've just learned the hard way about how important all of that is. And as I face that in my life again now, I'm just so relieved that those pieces are put into place. That way I can put my energy into helping my husband get through this really difficult time, and I don't have to worry about my center. I also don't have to worry about my finances as much anymore. As an owner, you kind of always want to worry about your finances. You just always want to make sure nobody cares for your money like you do. So it is something you just always want to make sure you're overseeing. Try not to completely check out. That is when it seems like things get really, really bad. And I know how awful things feel sometimes. I know how exhausting life can get. And I know how just overwhelmed things get. And that desire to just shut everything out can be so strong. But eventually you're going to come out of this. And eventually there will be another side. And you know, this passes, everything passes. And when you do come out of it, you don't want things to be a mess. For me, it was like waking up into a nightmare. When I finally pulled myself out and really decided, okay, I've got to get this all fixed. It was like waking up to a nightmare, and sorting through everything was just so hard. So I just really never want to go through that again. And it's hard enough dealing with what life throws at us without also having to deal with a disaster when all of it's over. So, you know, it's just something I'm really making sure this time I'm not going to let that happen again. I just know that when this phase of our life is over and our things just look better for us, I just want it to look better for real. I don't want to go from one disastrous situation into another. We have no control over what's happening with my husband's health right now, but I do have control over what happens with my business. And I do have control over what it will look like on the other side of this. And I know now how important it is to stay in control of what I can control, because there's so much out there in life that we cannot control. So it is just vitally important that we hang on to the control that we have. I also think that it can be pretty therapeutical. So keep that in mind too when you face difficult times, or if you're facing a difficult moment. And if you are, or if you have and you weren't prepared, don't beat yourself up over it. I spent years beating myself up. It made me take longer to get out of the situation I was in because of how I was beating myself up. Just move on is all I can say. You know, basically tell yourself what's in the past is in the past. it's time to take accountability for it and move on. And that is really the best way to go. Just you can move on when you take accountability, admit what you need to do to get it right, and move forward, get it done. That's all I can say. I mean, it's really as simple as that. I know it's not that simple though. It's so hard to do. In the long run, it'll take so much weight off your shoulders and you will be so much better off for it. So I think I'm just going to end it there. Keep my family in your prayers, in your thoughts as we're going through this. And again, subscribe to me on iTunes. I really hope this wasn't too heavy for you guys. And if it was your first time listening, go back and listen to one of my other episodes. They're not usually this heavy, I promise. And they won't always be this heavy, but it is an important topic for us to really think about. So again, give me a review on iTunes and join our Facebook group, the Childcare Business Professionals, and also like the Childcare Business Coach on Facebook. And let's have a conversation about this episode. Let's talk about what are you doing to prepare? And if you've been through it too, what have you put into place to help make sure that your center is ready? If you have any questions, feel free to message me. You can also email me. I will put my email in the show notes. I am a little slow answering emails right now, but I promise I will get to them. So again, thank you for joining me today, and tune in again next week for our next episode. Have a great week.